Hi everyone, I'm Isabella. I'm the co-founder here at Kind Community and will be your host today on the Kind Community Show. On this show, we share stories of founders, activists, and influencers doing great things for people and the planet. And we also discuss how collaboration can make the sustainable attainable. On today's episode, we have the founder of Clever Crabon, Michelle Lee. Clever Crabon aims to leverage consumer voices, raise carbon footprint literacy, and build a world where everyone can make informed, indeed clever carbon decisions. Their site, packed with engaging visuals and interactivity, jollily hides what's in fact a deeply powerful solution to measuring companies' carbon impact. Make no mistake, there's a revolution being fueled here. Just like calorie labeling, Clever Crabon is empowering citizens with information to make more informed purchasing decisions, but also providing the grounds to hold businesses and manufacturers accountable in a way previously impossible. Michelle is here today to talk about her journey, the importance of carbon literacy, how consumers can use their voices to create change, and how manufacturers can leverage carbon labeling as an incentive to compete on impact. Hi, Michelle. It's wonderful to have you here today. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, good morning.
So to start, Michelle, we'd love to learn a little bit more about your journey from getting your master's in cancer genetics to starting Clever Crabon. So was there ever a aha moment where you realized that becoming an entrepreneur, particularly in the climate action space, was where you were meant to be?
Yeah, cancer genetics to climate change and a little bit of tech in between. And I never thought that I would be an entrepreneur per se, and it wasn't really planned for me to become a founder and CEO. I just really enjoyed sustainability, and I felt that there was a bit of a gap in the market in terms of, relatable content that's fun and hip and, like all the brands that we love out there, like Oatly and Urban Outfitters, where's the sustainability brand that kind of represents that? And so I embarked on a bit of a journey and a side project, and I did it along with my full-time job for almost 8 months. And then I realized that my full-time job wasn't really the right fit for me anymore, and so I left it, and then I just had Clever Crabon to work on full-time.
That's fantastic. So you really took that kind of leap of faith, but also had the experience while you were working full-time, almost like a side hustle, trying to dip your toes into what could be and now is Clever Crabon. That's great. Mm-hmm. And I think many people don't realize that we all have our own personal carbon footprint. So can you briefly talk us through the importance of carbon literacy? And why do you think that the content and conversation around carbon footprint hasn't evolved in the last couple of decades?
Yeah, I mean, carbon literacy is so important. And as you mentioned, most of us don't really realize, the fact that we're on a live stream right now. There are data centers that are using electricity, even using natural resources like water to cool down. And so everything that we do really has an impact because we use and burn fossil fuels in the process, whether it's, this live stream or boiling water for our coffee or, cooking a meal, anything that we do really. And so it's just important to know that we have one, and very similar to nutritional labels, it's another data point for you to understand, the impact that you're having on the body. You can make the decisions that are, working for you, similar to carbon footprint. And, companies like Oatly and Allbirds, they're already starting to carbon label, which is really great. But you bring up a good point, Izzy, in terms of, there's not a lot of enablement and the conversation hasn't really evolved too much. And I think part of the reason is because carbon footprint is normally something that's dealt with by governments and maybe large manufacturers that are large emitters of carbon dioxide because they use a lot of fossil fuels in their manufacturing process. And it doesn't really trickle down to just normal people like you and me. And what's important is that now consumer brands are getting involved, like I mentioned, Oatly and Allbirds. And what that means is when products are carbon labeled, there's a level of transparency and accountability that was never available before. And the more carbon literate we become, the faster the movement around carbon labels become as well. And it's going to change the world. You know, companies are going to look at their supply chains, look at their manufacturing, and look for ways to reduce because now it's publicly available information. So can't wait for that to happen.
Definitely, information is key. So the Kind Community team have all taken the 2-minute Clever Carbon quiz. And for our audience, if you haven't taken it already, we definitely encourage you to do so. It's really engaging, it's hip and fun, as you say, but it was really informative in understanding our personalized carbon footprint and ways in which we could lower impact at home through our purchasing habits, transportation, and the food that we eat. But I was wondering, are there any other factors that could be impacting our footprint? And the first that came to my mind was digital consumption, but are there any other factors that should be taken into consideration?
Yeah, I mean, I think the factors that we include in the quiz really cover the vast majority. And, you know, digital consumption is definitely a very large one that is included in consumption. But yeah, it's something that many of us don't know. And as I mentioned in the beginning, you know, data centers have a lot of hardware that is high carbon intensity to manufacture them. It's high carbon intensity to upkeep and maintain the data center. So things like that really do creep up. But you know, if we look at our diet, if we look at the way that we commute, if we look at our home electricity and consumption there, those are really the places where we can make a dent if we want to make some small changes to improve our carbon footprint.
Absolutely. In your recent TED Talk, you take us through the Clever Carbon strategy. The first part of that strategy is leveraging our voices as consumers, but often consumers can feel overwhelmed in the face of the climate crisis. So what advice do you have for people who feel that their purchasing habits aren't making a difference, and how can they leverage their voices to influence change?
I think fundamentally, before, you know, people may not be accustomed to like giving feedback, but now more and more, it's just so important. And actually, on Earth Day, we put out a little campaign to talk about clever reviews, where we encourage people to A, write reviews, and B, write a clever review. And first of all, let me tell you why reviews are important. They're really important because they give the manufacturer or the provider feedback. And the providers want your feedback. They want to improve their product so that you will consume their product and you will consume more of it. And when you give them feedback, maybe you want the packaging to have, you know, recyclable recycling instructions. Is it recyclable or not? Or maybe, you know, the cap on a toothpaste was hard to remove, and et cetera, things like that. By actually telling the provider they can make the product better, which means that when you buy it, you'll actually use it and you're not going to A, discard it or just have it sitting around, or even worse, you're going to return it with the shipping and stuff. That's a huge cost for manufacturers. And by you giving more feedback, it'll help them improve the product. But also, other people looking to buy the product can understand, like, is this exactly what I'm looking for? So again, there's less returns, less inefficiencies. And a clever review includes a sustainability component. So for myself, you know, I eat a lot. I love food. I'm a huge foodie. And every time I review a restaurant, I'll always include a sustainability component as well. So, you know, if they use paper straws, I'll call that out and say, it's great that they do that. If they, you know, maybe use some single-use cutlery, I might give a kind suggestion to say, hey, you know, it would be nice if, you know, there was a more sustainable option for cutlery or whatnot. So, you know, for so many different reasons, reviews are important. And even if you haven't been used to it in the past, it does matter and it will make a difference.
No, that's great. That's great feedback for sure. So you've mentioned Oatly and Allbros. You mentioned it in your tech talk, and you mentioned them again today. And they are great examples of businesses that have started to kind of lead the way in carbon labeling their products. But that a revolution in carbon labeling is still a fight that climate change is yet to see. And being able to use reference points from different companies. Carbon labeling, and what advice would you give businesses to know where to start when it comes to carbon labeling?
Yeah, carbon labeling is very new. It's a new concept, and most businesses haven't really heard about it before. So we actually created a resource, a carbon labeling guide that walks through, what is carbon footprint? What is a carbon label? Why do consumers have it? And why should you embrace it? And I think that there's a camp of new sort of companies and businesses coming up that are focused on sustainability, and they will invest in it. They will, divert resources to creating carbon labels. And then there are businesses who have been around for a while who are not really accustomed to that and not necessarily having sustainability as a main focus for their business. But, I think that more and more there's going to be greater ways to automate the process to create, carbon labels and define the calculations. And eventually, I think that it's going to be a mandate, just like how nutrition labels were. I'm sure food companies weren't like, oh, yay, now we need to do
Yeah.
tests and stuff and, keep it up regularly. It's not necessarily like that, but it's important for consumers, it's important for society. So eventually it will be mandated. In the meantime, check out our carbon labeling guide, and there are lots of resources out there and more coming out as we speak.
That's fantastic, and I love the example you gave previously on. It's similar to calorie labeling or any nutritional labeling, but then you have that reference point, and you can refer back to different products. And though you may not understand exactly how they came to that number, you can compare it to other products that are quite similar. And a couple of years ago, you launched a Clever Crabon coffee menu. How did you come up with this idea, and what kind of response did you get from both businesses and consumers?
Yeah, the coffee menu is one of our favorite tools to help raise carbon literacy. And, I lived in a building that had a coffee shop below, and shout out to the coffee shop, The Hive, and Marco, who's the owner there. We had a lot of conversations around just sustainability in general. I was sharing my carbon footprint, Clever Crabon journey with him. And one day I was like, I literally, my unit was on top of the coffee shop, and I was just sitting there. I was like, oh my God, what if we had this menu? And I just quickly drafted up what it would look like on a Google slide, and I shared it with our designer, who promptly redesigned what I did, thankfully. And I showed it to Marco, and he was like, yeah, I put that up. And that's how it happened. We actually originally did a screen print, and so many of my friends have helped me either cut cardboard or hold down the paper, the paper while I was like doing the screen printing. Yeah. And we handed out like physical cardboards to coffee shops. And then now we have it available in a PDF format in several different languages. So even if I don't live in your vicinity, you can still print it out and put it in a frame. And, I live in Brooklyn now, and we already have 3 shops that are displaying the coffee menu. And it's just a great way for people to enjoy what they love, which is coffee, but also learn a little bit about carbon footprint at the same time.
Oh, that's fantastic. And talking about carbon can sometimes feel a bit dry. Not this conversation, I hope, but it can maybe be a bit scientific and perhaps a bit confusing at times. So you have, as you mentioned, plenty of resources on the Clever Crabon website to support people with, engaging carbon conversation starters, but you also just launched corporate team building days. Can you walk us through the importance of this initiative and what could one expect attending one of these sessions?
Yeah, so this initiative is really, really important because employers as a platform for carbon literacy, I think, is going to be very necessary, and just sustainability in general. If we think about employers and we think about, mental health, well-being, fitness, diversity, inclusion. These are not necessarily things that we learned in school, but employers have really taken the role of teaching us, how to, be more diverse and inclusive, how to have better mental health. And I think sustainability is an important category within all of those. And, at the beginning, I was like, am I really going to be able to get a company to spend an hour with me talking about sustainability and carbon footprint? But I have been pleasantly surprised that the answer is yes. And I've also really put an emphasis on making it fun. So in our content, when everyone starts logging onto the Zoom call, we've got our carbon footprint jams playing in the background. And thank you for nominating a song to our playlist. That was really awesome. But, we've got some, Dua Lipa playing, or, Childish Gambino. And these are all songs that are dedicated to carbon dioxide. Usually they're breakup songs. It's kind of funny. But as people log on, it's already like really sort of like hip and cool. And as the session progresses, we have different points of feedback from the team, and we encourage them to use emojis, etc. So it's like very, hip and very current. And also I break up the content in a way that we're not just like, learning about one thing for an entire hour. It's, broken up into like 4 different parts. And each part has its own little fun activity. And I don't want to give too much away because there's a bit of a surprise factor. But if you go to our website, you can see corporate team building, and you can see some of the really great feedback that we've received from companies that have done it with us. So I think employers are going to be such an important platform, and hopefully something fun and engaging will make it more enticing.
Definitely. And you mentioned this, and I've done the same, just that Clever Crabon is so fun. It's really attractive. It's engaging. It's hip content. And your website has just recently been nominated for an award. As you mentioned, shout out to your designers and your developers. But can you talk us through your branding process, and how important / challenging was it to align the topic of carbon literacy with the upbeat design that you've created? But also, what advice do you have for founders who are still in the process of trying to pin down their branding and their message?
Yeah, our branding process was very important, because I knew from the beginning that what was going to make Clever Crabon different was the branding. And so, first of all, finding a good designer was really, really key to the mission success. And I interviewed over 10 different designers, and ultimately I chose Ryan Spence, who, is just absolutely brilliant. He just totally got what I was going for. And I remember the initial sort of proofs that he showed me, like, hey, this is like 3 different ways that the brand can go. And there was, sort of branding that's more tech company, like software company, very clean, informative. And then there was, Clever Crabon and the logo that we have now. And I was like, yeah, that's it for sure. And as we continue, Ryan continues to amaze me with his creativity and his ability to capture, our hip and fun sort of nature to the brand. And, super lucky to have found Ryan. And for companies out there, I think you can have the best product in the world, but if you don't brand it, and if you don't speak to your audience in a way that is meaningful to them or that they're used to, it doesn't matter how good your product is. No one is going to pay attention, because the market is so crowded. It's just, competing. You're competing for attention, and so you must pay attention to your brand. It must be a priority as you're launching, and it's definitely worth it to put your resources there as you start.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we certainly need to make sustainability fun and inclusive and accessible. And you've definitely nailed that. And finally, can you share what's next for Clever Crabon? What are you most hopeful for? And a bit of a loaded question, but what keeps you up at night?
Yeah, as we continue forward with Clever Crabon, I mean, each week is kind of different for us, and we have new opportunities, new people reaching out. We reach out to other people, and we go all different types of directions. And I have a team of amazing volunteers. We have almost 10 people on the team who pursue lots of different directions. But I think for myself, I am really focused on the employer part of the piece, employee enablement, because it's just the best way to scale carbon literacy. We need to do this quickly, we need to do this effectively. And so, how do I get on the radar of some of the bigger companies and get them to help share the message and amplify the message? So that's really sort of what I'm working on. And, what keeps me up at night is, I love seeing that a lot of companies are embracing sustainability. They're producing ESG reports, and they are trying to have more sustainable practices. A lot of companies are doing it, but not all. But, how sustainable is that? Are they doing it because there's like $1 trillion market for sustainable companies, or because it's the right thing to do? And if we continue to measure success from a monetary profit perspective, are we going to be successful? And that's some of the things, that's something that I think about a lot is, I think Clever Carbon does a lot of good, but from a monetary profit perspective, we don't have success in that area, at least yet. But, for the next generation of companies coming up, how do we measure success? How do we measure, profit? Is a monetary value still something that makes sense? And if it's ESG metrics, how do we get all companies to do them and to publish them and make them transparent?
Absolutely. Now it's time for our quick fire round. So 3 questions. The first one is, how do you define sustainability?
I define sustainability as something that everyone should know and practice. It's just common sense, and it's easy and fun, and everyone should do it.
What's your favorite sustainability hack?
I really try to conserve water as much as possible. So when I wash like fruits or veggies, have like a little tub of water, and I always keep that water so that when I, washing dishes later, or, just clearing up my sink, I can use that water instead of having a running tap.
Oh, that's fantastic. And what advice would you give to someone thinking about going into eco-entrepreneurship?
I think that it's a great time to get into the field. There's a huge community of people. You will have lots of support. You will have lots of people to bounce ideas off of. And I think it is really the next frontier of successful businesses. So go for it.
Great. And thank you so much for speaking with me today, Michelle. It was great learning more about you and Clever Crabon. Can you let our audience know the best way to learn more about you and Clever Crabon and how to stay in touch?
Yeah, absolutely. First and foremost, our website has our contact information. You can reach out to us with our form. You can send us a message on Instagram, on LinkedIn. You can, comment or whatnot. So you will very easy to find and connect with us.
Great. And our Instagram handles are at the bottom of the screen, so definitely keep in touch. But thank you so much, Michelle, for today's conversation. I look forward to speaking again soon.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you, Izzy.
Bye.
Bye.
Hi guys, if you were inspired by my conversation, please remember to subscribe, leave us a review, and share it with anyone you think would love to join our community. Remember, live what you listen and put into action what you've learned today. Because knowledge isn't power, it's potential power. And you have to use that knowledge for it to be powerful. Together, we can make the sustainable attainable. I'm Janavelli, and this is the Kind Community Show.